25 points and 10 assists a few days ago. She had 5 3-pointers in a game yesterday in the first half. But this is about Sophie Cunningham. And this girl, Sophie, there's something very special about her. I want to show you 3 clips, back to back to back. Sophie was being asked about transgender in women's sports, and she says, look, I just don't think we need to have men competing in women's sports.
There is a moment in every cultural earthquake when you can pinpoint the exact second the ground shifted. For the WNBA, that moment wasn't a championship game. It wasn't a record-breaking performance. It was a 29-year-old woman from Columbia, Missouri, standing in front of a wall of microphones after practice, being asked whether she wanted to take back what she said, and instead looking dead into the cameras and delivering 5 words that would detonate across the entire sports world. I said what I said. No PR handler rushing to her side, no carefully worded statement released at midnight to soften the blow. Just Sophie Cunningham, completely unbothered, completely composed, and completely unwilling to fold. And what happened next exposed something the WNBA establishment had spent years hoping nobody would notice, that the fans, the culture, and the money had all quietly moved somewhere the league never planned for them to go. This is the full story, and it is wilder than you think. To understand how Sophie Cunningham became the most polarizing and arguably the most powerful figure in women's basketball right now, you have to go back to before any of this, because a year ago, almost nobody outside of hardcore WNBA circles knew her name. She grew up in Columbia, Missouri, a self-described Midwest girl who played 4 years at the University of Missouri and became the program's all-time leading scorer with 2,187 points. She was a McDonald's All-American, a 4-time All-SEC selection, the kind of college player who everyone assumed would dominate the pros. Then, the 2019 WNBA draft happened, and despite all those accolades, she went 13th overall, a second-round pick, to the Phoenix Mercury, not exactly the coronation her college career suggested was coming. She spent 6 years in Phoenix, solid, reliable, a career average of 7.7 points per game across 182 regular season games, good enough to rank 8th in franchise history in appearances. She helped Phoenix reach the WNBA Finals in 2021, hitting big shots in the playoffs and proving she belonged. But she was never the story. She was the supporting cast, the professional whose name appeared in box scores but never on magazine covers. Then, on January 31, 2025, she got traded. A 4-team deal involving the Dallas Wings and Connecticut Sun sent her to the Indiana Fever and straight into the orbit of Caitlin Clark. Everything that happened next was set in motion by that trade. The Fever were already the most talked-about team in the WNBA before Sophie arrived, and that was entirely because of Caitlin Clark. Clark had entered the league in 2024 as the most hyped rookie in women's basketball history, smashing records and dragging the league's ratings to heights nobody had seen before. But along with the record crowds and the television numbers came something darker, a pattern of opposing players physically targeting Clark that the league seemed either unable or unwilling to stop. Sophie Cunningham watched it happen all through 2024 from the outside. By the time she arrived in Indiana for 2025, she had apparently decided exactly what her role was going to be. The night of June 17, 2025 is when everything changed. Indiana was playing the Connecticut Sun, and Sun guard Jacy Sheldon poked Caitlin Clark directly in the eye during the game. Not a basketball play, a deliberate poke in the eye. 1 quarter later, Sophie Cunningham found Sheldon on a subsequent play and wrapped her up, sending her to the floor in what could generously be described as the most thunderous act of teammate loyalty the WNBA had seen in years. All 3 players, Sophie Cunningham, Sheldon, and a Sun player who rushed in, were ejected. Within 48 hours, Sophie Cunningham had more than 1 million followers on Instagram and TikTok. 7 new brand deals were reportedly in motion. Her agency had Dana White's people on the phone. And a single finger point at Phoenix Mercury star DeWanna Bonner later that season became one of the most remixed, reposted, and repurposed memes of 2025. eventually ending up on the official White House social media account alongside a video of Donald Trump pointing at a rally crowd.
Women, if you were born with a dangling, we don't want you to compete with girls. That's all it is. And by the way, I don't have to say this. You can pause it right there because we can hear it. I don't have to say it right there. I want you to hear it from this young girl. She's the one that's being, that has the most at risk. I sent you the clip on the next one if you want to pull it up. This is the one that you want to see. Megan Rapinoe. She is siding with what Sophie has to say. So just watch this commercial, these highlights. I don't know if we can.
She had gone from $45 Adidas sneakers she bought off Amazon to a cultural phenomenon in the span of a single summer, and she had done absolutely nothing to slow it down. The MAGA Barbie nickname did not start in 2025. It had been floating around online since her Missouri days, a shorthand that critics used to package her appearance, her roots, and their assumptions about her politics into a two-word dismissal. She is tall, blonde, from Missouri, and in the WNBA, which has long cultivated a progressive political identity. To a certain corner of the internet, those facts alone were enough to write the entire story for her. For a long time, Sophie let it slide, but when it exploded into mainstream coverage, she addressed it directly in an interview with the New York Times. "I'm clearly white and from Missouri," she said, "and so I think there was a lot of assumption there. All I have to say is I really am right in the middle, and I think a lot of America is like that. In our culture today, you have to choose, and you have to be an extremist, and that's just not me. I agree with things on both sides. I disagree with things on both sides." It was not the firebrand political declaration her critics wanted. It was measured, it was calm, and it was completely unsatisfying to everyone who had already decided who she was. Then, the White House used her pointing meme. The post went everywhere. Reporters asked her about it immediately. She said she saw it the same way she saw the thousands of other accounts that had remixed the clip, just another version of a viral moment. She hadn't approved it, she hadn't asked them to take it down. She simply kept playing basketball. For her critics, the refusal to perform outrage was itself an act of defiance. For her growing fan base, it was exactly why they loved her. But none of that was the earthquake. The earthquake was still coming. ESPN published a wide-ranging profile on Cunningham in late July 2026. The piece was framed largely around the MAGA Barbie label, examining what it meant, where it came from, and whether it was fair. The journalist raised the question of Sophie's political views directly, connecting her appearance and her background to the conservative-leaning sections of the WNBA fanbase that had adopted her and Clark as their favorite players. And then, Sophie said something that nobody in the league's front office was prepared for. She said she wanted to protect young girls, in locker rooms, in sport, from competing against biological men. "I got a lot of negative feedback about me hating trans," she told ESPN. "And I'm like, I never once said that. I think that I am here to extend love, but I also think with that love is truth, being honest, and I want to protect young girls in a locker room or young girls in sport who shouldn't have to go against biological men." The next day, reporters gathered around her before a game. The question was simple. Did she want to walk any of that back? Did she want to clarify, soften, reframe? She looked at them and said, "I think it's kind of common sense. I said what I said. I think I'll always believe in that. I think it's really important to protect children, and that includes little girls who are also in that category. I stand on what I said, and I always will." 5 words. I said what I said. And just like that, the entire league was on fire. It is worth being clear about what Sophie was and wasn't saying. She was not claiming that a trans athlete had ever played in the WNBA, because none ever has. The league's collective bargaining agreement states only that players who are women are eligible, without further defining the term. The debate she stepped into is largely a hypothetical one at the professional level, though it connects to very real policy fights happening at the high school and college levels across the country. President Trump had signed an executive order titled "Keeping Men Out of Women's Sports" in February 2025. The Supreme Court had upheld transgender athlete bans in West Virginia and Idaho just weeks before Sophie's comments went viral. The cultural ground was already soaked in gasoline. Her words were the match. The response from critics was fast and coordinated. The MAGA Barbie tag got louder. Media commentators lined up to suggest she was playing to a political audience, that her comments were harmful, that the league should respond. The expectation, clear in the tone of every hit piece and every angry tweet, was that Sophie would eventually feel the pressure and either apologize or go quiet.
Neither happened. What happened instead was something that genuinely appeared to catch the WNBA's front office off guard. The fans revolted, not against Sophie, but against everyone coming for her. Social media flooded with support. Videos of her playing exploded in engagement. Her follower counts kept climbing. Fans who had never watched a WNBA game in their lives were suddenly following the Indiana Fever because of her. Some supporters began targeting the games and social media pages of players and commentators who had spoken out against her, creating a very visible counter-pressure campaign. Ticket interest around certain matchups reportedly shifted in ways that reflected the cultural fault line the story had exposed. The WNBA found itself in a trap with no clean exit. Punish Sophie, and they risk infuriating the massive wave of fans that her viral moment and Clark's superstar presence had attracted to the league in the first place. Ignore it, and critics accuse the league of cowardice. Endorse her position, and they alienate their historically progressive core audience. There was no move on the board that didn't cost something significant, and Sophie just kept going to work. The moment Patrick Bet-David stepped into the story, the WNBA's ability to manage the narrative was gone. PBD, a media figure with millions of deeply engaged viewers built on a brand of contrarian, raw political commentary, amplified the Sophie Cunningham story to an audience that had zero overlap with the typical WNBA viewership. He framed her defiance as symbolic of a broader cultural moment, a woman inside a progressive institution saying out loud what he argued most people believe privately. It didn't matter whether you agreed with PBD's framing or thought it was overblown. What mattered was the scale. Suddenly, millions of people who had never considered watching a WNBA game were watching clips of Sophie Cunningham, looking her up, following her. The story had permanently escaped the sports lane. Then, the White House press secretary Caroline Leavitt was asked about Sophie at an official press briefing. She defended her, said Trump was following the story, said Sophie had guts. A GOP senator praised her publicly. The story that the league had presumably hoped would fade in a news cycle had instead become a talking point at the highest levels of American politics. The WNBA executives watching their league transform into a front line of the culture war had not signed up for any of this, and there was absolutely nothing they could do to walk it back. While the political world argued about what Sophie represented, Sophie Cunningham was building something. 1 year ago, literally 12 months before all of this, she was lacing up a pair of Adidas Women's Exhibit Select 2.0s that were available on Amazon for $45. A solid WNBA role player in her 7th season, doing her job, cashing a professional paycheck, invisible to most of America. Then came July 11th, 2026, UFC 329, T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. Dana White, the UFC's CEO and one of the most connected figures in American sports entertainment, was backstage when Sophie Cunningham walked in as a spectator. What happened next took 8 minutes to arrange, according to White himself. She said she wanted to walk around the octagon. He said, "Go ahead." She kicked off her shoes, grabbed a round card, and walked barefoot through the most famous fighting arena in the world, breaking out the finger point that the internet had already turned into a meme, in front of a crowd that lost its mind. The next day, Adidas announced her Crazy Energy player-exclusive sneaker, her own colorway, pink gradient, baby blue accents, orange soles, $120. It dropped on July 24, 2026, during All-Star Weekend. Within minutes of going on sale, most sizes were gone. In under 1 hour, it had completely sold out.
She also appeared in Sports Illustrated's swimsuit special, landed an Arby's deal, got billboard placements, 7 new brand partnerships in total after the Sheldon incident went viral. All of them built on the authenticity of someone who simply refused to perform a version of herself that wasn't real. 1 year, From $45 sneakers to a sold-out signature shoe, from a box score name to a sold-out signature shoe, a UFC appearance and a political firestorm, all while averaging 9.3 points per game and shooting nearly 43% from three. Here is the part of the story that nobody in the media wants to discuss directly because it is complicated and inconvenient for every available narrative. Caitlin Clark has not taken Sophie's side publicly on the transgender athlete debate, but she has not distanced herself from Sophie either. In her 2024 Time Athlete of the Year interview, Clark was asked about trans athletes and said everybody should have the same rights and that trans people deserve the same respect as anybody else. She did not directly answer whether biological males should be permitted to compete in women's sports. It was a carefully non-committal answer, and many conservatives who loved her were frustrated by it. Many progressive voices gave her credit for it. Since Sophie's comments exploded, Clark has said nothing that contradicts her teammate. They remain visibly close. Sideline interactions, social media activity, all of it projecting the image of two teammates who have each other's backs. Clark's body language around Cunningham has remained exactly what it was before the controversy: warm, loyal, unbothered. And this is the detail that makes the WNBA's position genuinely untenable. The Clark is the reason the league's ratings have surged. She is the reason new fans are showing up. Her Nike signature shoe, the Caitlin 1, is scheduled to drop on October 1st, 2026, and will almost certainly be one of the most commercially significant moments in women's basketball history. The league cannot afford to lose her goodwill, and Clark has given every signal that Sophie Cunningham has it. The old guard thought they could isolate Sophie. They assumed her teammates would create distance to protect their own brand deals. What they got instead was a wall, and the most important player in the sport standing quietly but unmistakably behind it. Step back from the noise for a moment. Strip away the political framing from both sides, the people who want to turn Sophie into a right-wing icon, and the people who want to dismiss her as a culture war prop. And what you find underneath is something genuinely interesting. A woman who spent 7 years as a professional athlete, largely unnoticed outside of basketball circles, is now a brand, a symbol, and a political lightning rod. She did not plan any of it. She did not hire a crisis PR firm to engineer a moment of manufactured authenticity. She got traded to a new team, defended her teammate, pointed her finger at someone during a heated game, told a reporter what she actually believed, and refused to apologize when people got upset about it. That sequence of events, entirely ordinary by the standard of what athletes do every day, produced one of the most explosive cultural moments women's sports has ever generated. And the reason it exploded is really not about Sophie Cunningham at all. It is about a fan base that had been waiting, perhaps for years, for someone inside the league to just say the quiet part out loud without immediately walking it back. The WNBA has built its identity around a very specific cultural brand. That brand has been enormously important to the league's survival and its athletes' visibility. But it has also created an environment where certain opinions could not be voiced without professional consequences, and where the fan base that showed up with the money and the ratings surged by Caitlin Clark turned out to have very different cultural expectations than the league had planned for.
Sophie Cunningham did not create that tension. She simply walked into it, said what she thought, and refused to leave. Here is where this ends up, at least for now. Sophie Cunningham is averaging 9.3 points per game for the Indiana Fever, shooting the ball better than she ever has in her professional career. Her Adidas shoe sold out in under an hour. Her social media following has exploded. She walked barefoot through the UFC octagon. The White House talked about her at a press briefing, and she has not apologized for a single word. The WNBA front office is stuck.
Caitlin Clark, the league's golden ticket, hasn't blinked in Sophie's direction. The fans who showed up for Clark have made clear they are not interested in watching Sophie get made an example of. The independent media amplification has taken the story so far outside the league's control that there is no narrative management play left to run. What Sophie Cunningham has done, whether intentionally or not, is expose the exact fault line running through the WNBA's foundation. The league desperately needs the revenue and attention that stars like Clark and, increasingly, Cunningham herself generate. But those stars are not performing the role the institution wrote for them. They are doing something far more dangerous. They are just being themselves. And in 2026, it turns out that is the most rebellious thing a woman in professional basketball can do. The woman who was playing in $45 sneakers a year ago just sold out her own shoe in under 60 minutes. The player nobody was supposed to notice just became impossible to ignore. And the 5 words she said outside that practice gym, calm, firm, completely unafraid, are still echoing through every boardroom, broadcast booth, and comment section that touches women's basketball. Some stories build slowly. This one detonated, and the fallout is nowhere close to finished.